My name is Ahmad Yunus. I'm a senior technical marketing engineer here at VMware. I cover the vCenter Server appliance. I cover migrations going from Windows to the appliance, as well as VMware Cloud on AWS.
So my name is Frank Denneman. I'm a senior staff architect of the vSphere of the Cloud BU. And I'm the technical lead for technical marketing of the VMware Cloud and AWS service.
Okay, so here's the agenda for today. We're going to be talking about SDDC overview. Then we're going to jump into resource management, hybrid cloud connectivity, and then if we have time, questions. So as Frank and I started preparing for this session, one of the things we wanted to discuss is the difference between what we do today on-prem versus your cloud model. And in the on-prem world, we have to order servers, right? We have to wait for the delivery, then we have to prep them, then we have to rack them, so on and so forth. And that takes time. So Frank went out and did a poll. You want to talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, so I did a poll about how long will it actually take for you to get a server up and running. So from the moment you think I need new resources up to the moment where you actually have them available. And it was interesting, the most interesting thing was actually that it wasn't a consistent process. Oh, sorry. Right? So what you see here is just the responses on Twitter that says, look, it's no telling actually because the process of purchasing is completely, erratical, or it takes 2 to 4 weeks. So what you see is that it's an inconsistent model, but in reality, especially nowadays, we need to be as responsive as possible, right? What Pat told in the keynote about a tech leaves tech, and that we are now breaking up new business models due to the fact that we have tech available. Now, one of the key elements is to have it available whenever it's needed, typically as fast as possible. So one of the companies that basically advises corporations, they had a magical number, and they said it takes up to 86 days to complete this process. And that was just an average, right? So there are actually companies who have to wait 120 days to get a server up and running. Now, typically a whole project doesn't even take up 120 days. So you need to get some foresight on whether that hardware or that resources is necessary. Now, typically that's not a problem for most, but then you come into a finance discussion, because now you need to convince a lot of people that you are going to need those resources based on a hunch or maybe some data that might not be true. So that's a difficult conversation to have, especially when you're a tech guy and you want to fix problems and you want to create a better infrastructure, and now you have to convince somebody else of spending money. So that's something that we thought that, hey, this is something that is not interesting anymore, right? So with VMC, so by show of hands, who of you have been attending another session of VMware Cloud and AWS? Okay, so most of the days. So we're not going to explain everything, because this session is assuming that you have some basic knowledge of it. But the idea is that we will create a cloud SDDC, so it's running vSphere, it's using vSAN for storage, and it uses NSX for network configuration. And we're going to deploy that software technology on bare metal services running in an AWS infrastructure, right? So the reason why we chose AWS is it's the best data center operator in the world with presence all over the world. So now we can use the elasticity model of Amazon and allow you to actually grow your clusters when needed. So from a CEO conversation or a financial conversation, we're moving from a CAPEX model to an OPEX model. So you don't have to convince your boss anymore that you need those resources right away, because you actually can show it. So you still need to convince him, of course, but he doesn't have to pony up the money, right, for an X number of time, because you can just add new service with this model. So by default, we start off with 4 hosts in your SDDC cluster. Now, if you need more, you can add more service. So in this initial availability of VMware Cloud and AWS, we allow 4 hosts, and soon we will allow you to grow up to 16 hosts. So that means in a 16 host cluster, you have almost 580 cores at your availability, right? Now, for memory, you can go from 2 terabytes to 8 terabytes of memory. So for the quick calculation, every host contains 36 cores with 512 gigabytes of memory. Now the cool part is, from AWS, is that we can provide resources by an API call or by using the vSphere UI. So after initial availability, we will add the functionality of resize. So what you see here is we right-click on the cluster and you get this option resize. And the UI will present you the option of adding new hosts. So you can say, I want to have 1 host or 2 hosts up to 16. So by just a click of a button, you can add more hosts. So this is brilliant, right? So you have a number of VMs running, it becomes full, now you just right-click on your cluster, resize, add another host. That's a far more easy conversation with your boss about allocating budget, right? Now, one of our colleagues, actually, he looked at it and he said, look, this is an API call, right? So this means I can use a Lambda function in AWS, and they have this IoT button. So which is just a clicker button, and you can configure that button to execute a particular API call. So what he did was, just like this clicker, he just programmed the clicker. When I click on this button, I will generate an API call of adding another host. So he clicked on it, and he did a demo to us, and he clicked on it. The AWS infrastructure just added another host, DRS did its magic, rebalanced everything, and everything was fine, just by clicking a button, right? So he wanted to have another host, he clicked again. Now in the keynote, we talked about a 2-hour deployment time, but that's for a net new cluster, a net new cloud SDDC cluster. So when you have that up and running, adding another host doesn't take 2 hours. Now I cannot quote you on the time it takes. Legal advised me to use the words within moments, right? So you can have an idea on how fast this really is, right? Now he just used a button. The cool part of that demo was not actually pressing that button once, but holding that button for a longer period of time, because it actually removed the host. Now think about that from a capacity perspective and from a seasonal workload, right? So when you want to have hosts, you need, and you order hosts, you have to wait 86 days or a little bit less in some cases, but you are stuck with those hosts. But with this, you just, with the click of a button, can add the host whenever you need it. So when you are in a particular branch where you have seasonal workload, you just can spin up more hosts when you need it, and when your season dies down or when it's complete, you just remove the host again, right? I think that's a brilliant model for you to start operate your data center. So the idea of AWS is to transfer your role from an admin to more of a resource manager. We take care of installing the vSphere, vSAN, and NSX. You have to take care of how you're going to consume those resources. So you will have a slightly different role in this model. Now what we can do with API calls is we can do everything automatically. So like I said, we install vSphere for you. So when you add another host, we will install vSphere for you. You don't have to do anything. So we will add a host to the cluster, and then we start to add all these management networks, right? So the VM kernel network, the vMotion network. But we also expose the logical networks. So one of the key features of VMware Cloud and AWS is that we use NSX. And by using NSX, we have something called logical networks, and we will expose them as well. So you don't have to do anything, right? So this is all done by VMware. Now the last thing what we do is we actually expand the vSAN data store. So every host has localized storage. When you add another host, it will be added to the vSAN data store. Now you can imagine that adding capacity is really quick. But what if you start to reduce the number of hosts? It will take a little bit longer because we have to get that data out and distribute it across the other ESXi hosts in the cluster. Again, by a click of a button, we can add more capacity. So what we thought about was, why don't we start to extend DRS? And with DRS, we basically set a threshold, like it has to be balanced. So resources has to be evenly consumed with the set of a particular threshold. But with this, we can actually start to consider expansion. So in the upcoming release, not the initial availability that's available right now, but in a future release, we will allow elastic DRS. And with elastic DRS, you will set a threshold. So for example, I'm using a random number right now. We might change it in the availability when it's there. But let's say we say the threshold is 80%. And the next step is, how many hosts do you want to add as a maximum? So let's say we have an initial cluster of 4 hosts, and I want to have a maximum of 8 hosts due to budget reasons, for example. So you configured the elastic DRS to burst up to 4 hosts. So what happens is that the cluster is starting to being consumed more by VMs up to the point of 80%. Elastic DRS kicks in, he will trigger an API call, he will add another host, or it will add another host, and then it will rebalance. So next time it's exceeding that threshold, it will add another host, up to the max of 4. Up to that point, it's done, it cannot expand more. So you need to monitor it, and you might want to increase the maximum cluster size of hosts. What we can do with DRS, we can also do with HA. So one of the key features is HA, and I think that's one of the most brilliant features in the vSphere stack. So when a host fails, we will restart the VMs on other hosts. Now, in most of the time, there's something wrong with software. Maybe it's a driver problem, maybe it's a firmware problem, or maybe it's a VM kernel problem. But what happens is the host reboots. So you have to check what's wrong with it, and after you solve the problem, you can add it back to the cluster. So in terms, you have a short-term resource problem, or a reduction of resources available to your VMs. Now what happens if the thing burns down, or what happens if something fails? Now you need to order another host. Well, guess what? You need to wait 86 days, right? We have an extreme amount of hardware available to us. So what we do is, when we detect that a component or a host fails, we will remove it from the cluster, and we will add another host to your cluster. So you don't have to do anything. That means that we just basically solved a long-term resource problem for a host outage, right? We understand that some things are solved quite easily, right? So if there's a reboot, we don't get the host out of the cluster, we will keep it in, right? Because by getting a host out, we need to clear the vSAN data store as well, right? So for some cases, we will have the host basically re-add to the cluster to avoid overhead on that level. Now, with this, all of these things, with the dynamic part of host, it means that we don't have a host name anymore for you that you can choose, right? So this is a bit of the pets and cattle discussion. So think about that when you use scripts in order to do things with your host. There is no pool of host names for you to decide, so you have to change your scripts in order to make this happen. So your cluster at one point can have 4 host names, but maybe because we are changing something underneath, within a week it can have other hosts with other host names, right? So take this into account that this is a much more dynamic environment. You need to only worry about the availability or the consumption of resources.
Thanks, Frank. So as Frank talked about earlier, we can actually create a data center via a single click. So here's a screenshot of our data center in our lab called TM SDDC, right? So by simply clicking Create SDDC, you'll get a wizard-driven operation that you can just go through, and we'll connect to AWS first. And now, as Frank was talking about, by default, we're going to have 4 hosts. There's going to show you the host capacity, total capacity, and today we have 1 region. In the future, we'll expand out. Once that's done, you'll just click Next, configure the network, and it's already up and ready to go. So far we've talked about, the cloud model, we've talked about on-prem, but how do we bring these guys together, right? So with VMware Cloud on AWS, we are introducing what's called hybrid link mode. Today on-prem, we have enhanced link mode, the ability to have one view for multiple vCenters within your vSphere SSO domain. And as of 6.5 update 1, we can have up to 15 vCenters within one SSO domain. So that's 15 vCenters that I can log into any one of them and manage them all. So we're going to expand on that with VMware Cloud on AWS with hybrid link mode. From initial availability, we're only going to be able to see one vCenter on-prem and your vCenter within your SDDC in the cloud, and then we'll expand on that. So let's take a look at what this looks like. All right. So first I'm going to go into my network tab. And now I got to create firewall rules, or I'm sorry, now I got to create my DNS. So by default, we're using Google DNS. I'm going to change my DNS to the one in my lab environment. And then I'm going to change my vCenter to my private IP. Once that's done, I'm ready to log in to my vCenter server within our SDDC using the cloud admin credentials. Next, I'm going to go into administration and I'm ready to link my domains. Now, before I link my domains, there's some requirements that I have to have in place. I need network connectivity before I can get started between my management gateway and my on-prem vCenter server. I also need to create a group. It can be called anything. In this case, we're going to call it, cloud admin, whatever. And these are the folks that are going to be able to log in and manage or consume the workloads that are going to be in their SDDC. Because remember, in our SDDCs, we have a restrictive permission model. So once I have those in place, I'm going to add an identity source, and that's pointing back to my Active Directory. So here, I'm going to go in and add my Active Directory by putting in the name, the DN, distinguished name for my users. So I'm going to go right into Active Directory, And the simplest way to do this is just go in, find your users, go to properties, and then find the attributes and just copy them directly. If you don't have rights, you will have to contact your Active Directory administrator, and they're supposed to provide you this information as well, because you will need an account to also join your identity source. So here I'm adding my groups. And once I've added my groups, now I'm just going to go in, give my domain name, give the alias, and again, because I have credentials within my Active Directory and I have rights as a domain admin, I can go ahead and use my own account. I'm also going to specify which domain controllers. You don't need to necessarily, but here I have redundancy, so I've added both, and my identity source is added. And since my identity source is added, now I can select my domain and the group that I want to consume these resources. And finally, to link, I also need my vSphere SSO domain credentials and password, so I can also establish that connectivity on-prem. Now that this is done, I'm going to be asked to log out from my cloud admin account, and I'll log in as myself, my AD user. So here I'm logging in with my ahmad@cpbu.lab account, and once I'm logged in, I can now see both my on-prem and the fact that it's linked. So as you can see, I now have my SDDC vCenter and my on-prem vCenter. I can also see which ones are linked to what. And then I can go in and actually take a look at my identity sources. And if you can see, I'm expanding out to take a look at what workloads I have running. That's it for hybrid link mode. What do you guys think?
Will this demo be available online?
So it will be available online, and then I plan to actually, right after the conference, after Barcelona, I'll have a lot of blog posts around hybrid link mode, how to get it set up, videos, things like that. So stay tuned.
Okay.
Sorry, I got to switch back and forth. Okay, so we've established connectivity between our on-prem and SDDC in the cloud. What can we do? Today, we can actually migrate VMs just like you can on-prem, but this time we can migrate VMs between our on-prem vCenter server to our vCenter server up in AWS. And hopefully in the future we'll be able to do it live, but as of GA, we're going to have to shut down a VM and cold migrate it. But the cool news is that because we have vSphere in both, AWS and on-prem, this VM can move back and forth with no issues. So let's take a look at that. So again, I'm going into my network tab, and the first thing I need to do is make sure that my firewall rules are in place for my hosts. So here I need, connectivity on port 902, 903, and once that's established, I can actually log in. Again, because we've already established hybrid link mode, I'm going to log in using my AD credentials. Then I'm going to go into my on-prem vCenter server, and I'm going to shut down one of my virtual machines. After shutting down one of my virtual machines, I'll be able to actually migrate it. So here I'm going to select migrate, and it's going to walk me through the wizard. And if you take a look at this wizard, it's the same wizard that we have on-prem. So as you can see, there's no new skill sets needed. You can just consume resources right away and not have to worry about a huge learning curve or anything else. So that's the beauty of having both vSphere in the cloud and on-prem. So I'm gonna select my cluster. Now, keep in mind here, you see we have a compute resource pool and a management resource pool. Because of the restrictive permissions model, you're only gonna have access to the compute resource pool. The management resource pool we take care of. That's where NSX, our vCenter server and anything that is related to our management cluster lives. And we will maintain that for you. You don't have to worry about anything. The patching, the updates, all that, that's on us. So you won't have access to that. You can look, but you can't touch. So here I'm gonna select my workload data store. Even though you see that we have a vSAN data store, again, you cannot deploy to it. I'm going to select my workloads directory. And now I'm going to select my logical network that Frank mentioned earlier. Now I get the same normal details, and you're going to see my VM is now going from my on-prem to my SDDC in AWS. And by the way, when I recorded this, this is how fast it went. This was live. There's no Camtasia magic. That's how fast it went.
What port is required on the firewall?
So same thing like you do on-prem. You have to open up ports 902, 903. There's no difference.
The inbound and outbound.
And yeah, exactly.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah.
Yeah, would you mind going to the mic to ask questions? Sorry. Any questions you have, please go to the mic.
I was asking what port is required on the firewall to do the migration inbound and outbound.
Yeah, so you need inbound and outbound ports open. So 902, 903, just like you do today. And I can show you from what I had. So yeah, so here are the firewall rules that I have in place. So I have port 902, port 903, and I needed them anyway for VMRC access. And then I had the outbound rule for ESX. So let's go back here real quick. All right. So now I'm going up to check to make sure that what I said is true, that that VM actually did move. And there it is. So now I'm actually going to move it back to my on-prem environment. And again, the same wizard that you have on your on-prem is available within AWS. And I'm going to change my network to my on-prem, and it's going to start moving again. So basically, I did a round trip vMotion from on-prem to the cloud and back again. And I'm going to power it back on. That's it. That's pretty cool, huh? So as you can see, that my workload mobility can go from on-prem to the cloud basically with a click of a button.
I think you know.
With vRealize Ops, you have a UUID that's tied to the VM. When it changes from one vCenter to another, that UUID changes. Are you guys working to do anything to make sure that's, because you lose the historical information in VRops for that VM when it moves out of the vCenter. You got anything about that?
So I haven't played around with VRops in AWS, but my understanding is we'll be able to tie them both together. So you're going to have your on-prem, and we'll be able to also add in your SDDC vCenter as well. So you should be able to get and maintain all the historical views and stats. All right, so we've done the demo.
Thank you.
Yep.
So I talked a little bit about Elastic DRS. Thanks. But we are going to also use DRS itself. So within the Cloud SDDC cluster, we're going to use resource pools. I'm going to show you a little bit more about resource pools later on. But we also do, we also allow you to use, no, I'm going to rephrase that. What we do is that what Emad already told you was we're going to use some of the VMs and we're going to put them inside a resource pools that, that we manage. You will get another resource pool and you will, you can put your VMs on that resource pool. So every VMC customer or every VMware Cloud and AWS customer is going to be using resource pools. So that's an interesting step for most because I know that resource pool is a difficult thing to grasp. So what you see here is I expanded the management resource pool and there you will see the management VMs that we are running inside your SDDC cluster. So we're not going to create a management cluster, we're going to put those VMs inside your own cluster. That means that they will consume some resources. So these resources are consumed and we want to make sure that these resources are always available to them because we will manage your environment and the last thing we want is not being able to use vCenter or any other VM to figure out what's going on in your cluster. So you'll see that there's going to be a memory and CPU reservation. Now, the other resource pool, the compute resource pool, and this is a Virgin Cloud SDDC, so we don't have any VMs running, it is not configured with a reservation or on CPU and memory because you will have the rest, right? Now the interesting thing is we're not going to add more VMs as your cluster is growing. So that means that even if you grow your host count in your cluster, that percentage of resources that we consume is going to be diluted, right? Now, Emad told you a little bit about the reduced permission model. So in the next couple of weeks, we're going to, or is it already available? The white paper? Is the white paper already available?
The white paper is already out.
Oh, wow. So we have written a VMware Cloud and AWS permission model paper or operational model paper in which we explain what the difference is between a on-prem SDDC management and a in-cloud SDDC management. So one of the things is that you cannot touch the configuration of the hosts. We have created a couple of user IDs with different type of roles that allows you to do certain things. But you cannot touch or configure the cluster or the host itself. So like I said in this overview, affinity rules are not available in initial availability because we control the cluster, and at this time affinity rules like VM to VM affinity rules or VM to host affinity rules are configured within the cluster itself. So we are working on a solution for that, right? Now the compute resource pool is just the high-level compute cluster. So if you want to create resource pools underneath that, so child resource pools, you can do that. That's what we allow you to do. But one word of caution, if you are doing that, child resource pools, make sure that every VM will land in another resource pool. Otherwise you can have a contention problem when you don't have Elastic DRS configured, right?
So in resource pools, you got to go in and change the share values from time to time based upon how many VMs you have in which resource pools. Are we going to be able to do that in that nested group of resource pools?
Yes, you are the operator of your child resource pools inside the compute resource pool. Okay. So you cannot touch anything at that level, but beneath it, that's yours, right? So like I said, we are going to have a memory and a CPU reservation. At this point in time, we're going to use 76 gigs of memory of your entire cluster. One host is roughly 83 gigahertz, can provide 83 gigahertz, so you can calculate how much overhead we have in an initial cluster. So one of the things that Ahmad showed is that you need to deploy your VM inside a folder as well. So these are the standard folders. So if you use scripts to deploy VMs, make sure you include that as well. So one of the things that you need to figure out is, where am I going to place my VM? That is on your vSAN data store, on your own vSAN data store. So in the cloud SDDC model, and I actually showed you a little bit about that and I didn't discuss it, is that we're going to have 2 data stores. So in your on-prem vSAN, you can only have 1 vSAN data store. We have 2s. So we separated the VMs into and we concentrated them in our own vSAN data store. So we're consuming the same hardware, but we made a logical separation. So you cannot touch it and we can manage it completely. If you deploy a VM, you have to that particular vSAN data store. The next thing you need to do is you need to specify the compute resource pool. Third thing you need to do is, of course, include the folder. Otherwise, your deployment will fail.
So if you look at the screenshot here, you see templates as one of the folders. So on-prem, we have templates that we use, and of course, you don't want to have to reinvent the wheel and create them after you've created your SDDC. So what we're going to use to leverage that is we're going to leverage content library. We're going to use content library to onboard our templates, our ISOs, and any scripts you may have on-prem, and we're going to bring them up to your cloud SDDC. And the cool thing about what we're going to be doing is we have a content library assistant. And the content library assistant is via a command line, and you're just going to input where your templates live. Now today when you leverage content library, of course, you have to convert your templates to OVF, right? With the content library assistant, they're actually going to come in as templates. No conversion required. We'll also bring over your ISOs and any scripts that you have. The ISOs and the scripts you'll have to just put in a directory within one of your data stores, and then we'll pull all those up as well. So we'll be leveraging content library for things like that. And I showed code migration as one example to move VMs, but we'll also be able to use content library to also move VMs as well.
So out of interest, by show of hands, who are using actually content library in current version? Okay.
Okay, so even if you're not using content library, you will be using content library both on-prem and in the cloud, because as part of this process, we do have to create a content library. So if you have one existing, great. If you don't worry about it, we'll create it for you.
So the folders that you're showing up here, can I create my own folders, or these are the folders that, only folders I can use?
So these are the folders right now, again, because we have a restricted permission model.
Okay, so the permissions are assigned to the folders. There's no inheritance today on creating new folders. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So you can create anything under workloads, but you can't change any of the other folders.
Okay, so I can create subfolders under workloads.
Exactly, kind of just like the resource pools.
All right, thanks.
So we also talked a little bit about patching. So we are managing your cluster. We will take care of patching as well. So in our current model, what we do is we will alert you that there is a patching time available. Typically that's a week. So we will alert you that in week X, we're going to update your environment. So when we start, so one of the things is that we're doing is we will allow you to say yes or no, but at one point in time, you need to be patched, or your environment needs to be patched. So the moment you agree, within that week, we are going to patch your entire environment. What we typically do is we start off with the management environment. So vSAN, vCenter, NSX, all that stuff. Now, because we are patching vCenter, that appliance needs to be rebooted. So what happens, the moment you get that email, we will alert you that from this point on, from that time X, your management environment is not available, right? So once that is patched and when that process is done, we're going to alert you that, hey, the management environment is up and running again, you will have access again. So let's be very clear, your VMs, your workload that are running inside the environment are not affected, right? So whenever we do with something with management, it won't affect the uptime or the availability of your workloads. But we also need to patch the ESXi host. So you will get another email saying that, hey, we're going to begin to patch your cluster. So one of the things what we do is we add another host during that patch process. So we will do it per host. Now in on-prem environments, typically when you patch a host, you just put it into maintenance mode and there are no resources available from that particular host. This is not the case with VMware Cloud and AWS, because we add another host and we remove another host, the amount of resources are exactly the same, right? And then we cycle through until everything is patched again. We will send you an email saying everything is patched, you're good to go. Now, one of the things is, what we do is we add more features along the way, and we will use different types of vSphere and NSX software that you have on-prem. So one of the things is that we create this environment in such a way that there is a extended backwards compatibility. So it doesn't mean that we patch the environment, that you have to patch your environment, right? So there's a longer period of time where you can have different types of versions when you're in a hybrid cloud structure.
Yeah, so starting today, at least for the initial release, you have to be on 6.5 patch D on-prem to be able to leverage things like hybrid link mode and all that. So at least starting, and then as Frank said, we'll patch and upgrade, but you can stay as you. We're not going to force you to have to stay or go on to the next upgrade as well.
So we built this service. It's a service, we built this in the last 2 years. And the last year we actually had different types of programs, talking to our customers, talking to our partners. And we had a lighthouse program where we had intensive contact with our customers that were using the environment, and we had a beta program. And one of the things that we saw was no customer basically updated their entire data center to 6.5. Right? So what most did, was they created a stepping stone cluster. They created a separate cluster with a particular vCenter and connected that with the environment. So they actually could manage their environment and update it in a more leisure way. Right?
Yep. So as we were talking through this, and we were looking at like adding hosts, remember the discussion we were having about how quick it was? And how it was kind of like Amazon Prime.
Oh, yeah. So we cannot state the amount of time to actually add another host, but we had fun because at one point we started to research, so what is the actual response time of when adding, if you want to order a server with Amazon Prime and you do same day delivery. Typically, if it was possible, it was typically 6 to 8 hours, right? So even if they have a drone and all that stuff, it's 6 to 8 hours. We will beat Amazon Prime with this solution as well. So we actually even beat Amazon at their own game, I believe.
I want my server and I want it now.
Yeah, exactly.
Instant server. Okay, so we wanted to save time for questions. So if anybody has questions, please come up to the mic and.
So during patching, who managed VM tools? Who does the update for VM tools? The client or VMware?
I have no definitive answer on that one.
Today I don't have an answer either. We'll get you something on that. I'm sorry?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have the senior director of the program in the back of the audience. I'm not wanting to put you on the spot, Narayan, but do you have an answer for us?
You need to walk down here.
They want to see you on camera.
He wanted to remain.
Specifically for VM tools, I believe it's your responsibility. I'll double check and check. Sorry. So I was just saying that for VM tools, I believe it's the customer's responsibility, right? It's part of.
It was this gentleman, but it's an overall good question because we have heard this question multiple times this week.
So there are a few things here. One is in our service description doc, we mention a bunch of these things. We have a getting started guide publicly available on docs.vmware.com. We specify exact vCenter permissions and privileges that you're allowed to do as a user. You are customer or partner. And from a maintenance perspective, we will publish a few more docs on that. Right now, we have a SLA doc and a service description doc that talks about some of these things. But to answer your question, it's your responsibility as a customer.
So we have created a new website specifically for this service, and we're going to add more resources on a weekly basis. So as we go along, you will get more and more information, right? Thanks, Narayan.
I use RV Tools quite a bit. Am I still going to be able to log in to your vCenter to retrieve reports?
So I haven't used RV Tools for a long time, but do you need root access for RV Tools?
I just need read access.
Okay, so that's a possibility,
Okay.
right? What we don't allow is root access to the server itself, to the ESX server.
Okay,
So what I think may happen is once you establish hybrid link mode, right? Now you should be able to log in, and RV Tools should see both vCenters, and you should be able to collect.
So
information.
I can't log directly I can't authenticate directly to the AWS vCenter.
So you can't with your account. You will have to have what we call a cloud admin account, right? So that's the account you would have to use.
Okay, and so I guess you guys are responsible for the vCenter as well, right? When it goes down.
Yes.
Yes.
You're going to get the alerts.
Yes.
You're going to have to get it back up.
Yep.
So do you, I've had this happen where the host goes down, that's the vCenter that crashes, or the vCenter goes down on that host too and comes back up. I kind of lose visibility on which VM's rebooted at that point, and I have to go around and figure that out through the host. Are you guys going to provide some kind of report back to go, these VMs were impacted by the reboot of the host?
Ryan, do you have an answer for that?
Sorry. So are you asking that? Are you asking specifically when vCenter goes down, you lose visibility, or are you asking in general?
Well, both, right? So if my vCenter goes down, which, okay, my host has the vCenter, that host crashes, vCenter goes down, I lose visibility on which VMs restarted until vCenter comes back up. So I need to be able to get a report back to go, these VMs are down, so I can contact the customers to go, please check your applications.
Okay, so got it, thanks for that. So I think the answer there is right now, when vCenter is up, you can see obviously all of the tasks in vCenter, right? Just, business as usual. When in the scenario that vCenter goes down, and we're on the hook for that to bring that back up, obviously, but you're specifically asking about the visibility of events in that time frame, right? Now, not right now, but in development, we will publish specific, a log stream essentially through syslog that will convey that information that you're looking for, that gap, the delta. That'll capture that delta when vCenter is down, but also capture the whole vCenter event history and everything that you need to know.
Okay. And just one more question. When you talk about replacing a host when you're patching, are you're evacuating the vSAN disk underneath to the new host you're adding in?
No, we're not evacuating data at this moment. This is one of the models we're looking at, but it is, when we start to evacuate data, that prolongs the time, and it impacts the overall service for the other VMs, or could possibly so we basically add another host and patch the host and add the patched host back to the environment.
Okay, so you rotate the host out
Yes.
and then bring it back?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it's not a permanent replacement?
No.
Okay, thanks. No cost to you? And no cost to me? That's excellent.
Well, that's the interesting thing, right? Because in the contract you state you want to have 4 hosts,
Right,
right?
right,
So
but-
it's a service.
Right, okay. I get that. I just didn't understand when you bring a host up, you're not actually moving data from the, okay.
No.
That's the part that was kind of confusing me because it seems
Yeah.
like a lot of moving pieces at that point.
Yeah.
And
So-
the
yeah.
patching, you're only going to provide a week's notice because I need like probably a month or more.
Actually, it'll be a few weeks. It'll be a few weeks.
Okay.
Next week. So think of it this way.
And I could defer those?
Yeah. So there are a couple of options there. One is to provide a few weeks notice. We're looking at 3-week range right now, and then there's an option to install ahead, where you can actually choose to install before the maintenance window, the all-consuming maintenance window of operation. Right? So we're thinking about it in that context rather than deferring, right? Which is we can install ahead.
Okay, all right, thanks.
By the way, one thing that we didn't mention is that we will be backing up vCenter, the vCenter server appliance within your SDDC, and we will be using our native file-based backup, right? So we'll take care of that. Now the VMs themselves, you will have to take care of backing those up.
2 questions. First, if a mount point fills up on the vCenter, what's the response to that? And second, are we capable of maintaining a custom product locker for VMware tools?
So again, if something, we will be proactive when it comes to looking at vCenter because we'll have those alerts and things like that. So hopefully we'll be able to catch it. If we don't catch it in time, we will take care of getting vCenter back up and running. As far as your other question, do you know?
So there's the VMware tools that are built into the ESXi hosts individually, but if you want to maintain a, say, more up-to-date version of VMware tools, you can set a custom product locker, say, on a data store folder, and then update that manually and have all the hosts reference that when they go to update tools on a VM. So I don't know if that's something that can be done in the initial offering.
Not initially, but we may. I mean, I don't know if that's on the roadmap. Yeah.
Thanks.
My question is on vCenter SSL custom certificate. Who will be responsible for installing it?
Yeah,
You.
we are.
So we just give it to you and you will install it?
Yeah.
It's already available, full, proper signed certificates. We are on the floor.
Yeah.
Maintaining that, all of the above.
All right, thank you.
So I see pricing was released for this a couple days ago, and I guess right now it's on an hourly price model, and then they're going to work in the 1- and 3-year options. And I see it's about $8 an hour. And is that an always up thing, or can you shut down the host at night, like if it's a dev environment type of thing?
So yeah, obviously pricing is out $8 an hour, but you can. So there's a four host minimum, right, for the vSAN cluster, obviously. But beyond that, you can spin up additional hosts. You can add hosts. You can remove hosts when you don't need them, right? If you don't need the entire cluster, you can delete the cluster, and then you would not be charged for it once you delete it, obviously.
So it's 8 hours, or it's $8 an hour, 24 hours a day. It's not like you can run the hosts for, when you need them. If it's a development environment, shut them off at night, bring them back up, just have them run 8 to 5. Oh, we do have the options of
Additional
shutting down the
hosts. The additional hosts. So the initial cluster is always 4 hosts.
It's
That is
always-
the base.
okay,
That's always the
what I'm
base
trying to
cluster.
figure out here.
Yeah.
It's 4 up, 24
Always.
hours a day, all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the rest is basically what you want to do.
Okay,
right?
what about transactional costs?
If your use case is okay with spinning back the 4 hosts down, you can do that. Bringing them back up is 2 hours. So it's up to you.
Sure,
The
sure.
moment you bring down, delete your SDDC, the minimum 4 hosts, you stop paying.
But by deleting,
I see.
hold on.
Exactly.
So all the database information, okay.
Yeah.
And you got to set up everything again, correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
Right. But the good news is if you're backing up, right, all you got to do, spin up a new SDDC, do a restore of your VMs, and you're back to where you were.
Okay, appreciate you answering that question. What about transactional costs, you know, when you migrate between on-prem and, you know, the public cloud? When you
Bringing in
vMotion-
data.
When you vMotion a system, you know, are there fees that are going to be?
Yep.
Egress out of the VMware Cloud AWS account will incur the normal egress charges.
Okay,
And they'll be added on. So in your bill, normally you'll see the charge for hosts, right? Because we have a pricing model that's per host. And then you have additional line items for the egress charge and for any public IPs that you may consume.
okay.
So one of the cool things to add is we allow native connection to some of the cloud native services from AWS by using a different connection. So we start off with S3 and EC2. So those are typically connected via the internet, but because we have a integrated network, we actually connect directly to those services. So you don't incur egress cost, and it's actually high performant because it's already on the network, right? So if you have a particular VM running inside your cloud SDDC and you want to consume S3 or you want to create a new thing with combining EC2 instances and your VMs, that's possible. It's really high performant and you don't incur the egress cost. So this service will allow you to create new architectures that are not really possible as of this day. And this is the true benefit of the partnership between AWS and VMware.
Understood. Thank you very much.
We have 2 more minutes.
Well, I'm going to take all of it. Licensing so we have vRealize Suite on premise, and we want to be able to deploy in cloud. We can use the PLUs, right? But we're dedicated hosts, so I want to make sure I can use a socket based on those hosts out in the cloud, not the 15 instance is based, right?
So sorry, go ahead.
So are you specifically asking about reusing or leveraging your licenses on-prem?
Well, first, I guess, is vRealize Suite included in the licensing and the $8 an hour cost, right? If not, then I need to buy licenses for every host that's out there or 15 VMs, right? And I don't want to do the 15 VMs. Your host should easily handle, 50 plus VMs, as far as density. So I want to be able to use a per socket licensing on those if I have to pay for vRealize automation to be able to deploy VMs up there.
Right. Got it. So the way it works is these are apples and oranges, right? You're on-prem for CPU licensing, and what you're buying in the cloud. Cloud as a service model, you're really buying it using SPP or HPP credits. Thanks. You're really buying a gift card, right? Using SPP, HPP credits. You can get discounts on that gift card if you have existing on-prem licenses. So the way it works is, let's say you have 20 ESXi licenses on-prem, right? Yep. And so you will be, we will apply a 10% discount for the cloud consumption, right? It's what we call a hybrid loyalty program. And so existing customers who have ESXi licenses, vSAN licenses, NSX licenses will get discounts up to 25%, right? So essentially you're buying credits in the cloud to use for VMware Cloud on AWS, and then you'll get additional discounts if you are an existing on-prem customer. That's the way to think about it.
So that doesn't, to me, it doesn't explain if it's the OSI model or if it's a socket model.
So
I know we're, quote, getting a discount because we've already bought thousands of other licenses, right? But when I need to be able to license that stuff out there to be able to do VRA and VROPS, right? And what is that model? Because then that depends on how much the cost is, right?
Right. So from a VRA, VROPS perspective, there is no change. We're not there is no additional pricing model change outside of what VRA and VROps does today, right? It's normal pricing on their behalf. You go to VRA and VROps, you add a vCenter, and it happens to be in the cloud. And the regular VRA and VROps pricing and licensing will kick in, right?
So,
Yeah.
I think this question, there are people from the Cloud Management BU on the Solution Exchange.
Yeah,
They are marked there.
Yeah.
So have a conversation with these people. They can explain you in length what the use case is for VMware Cloud and AWS.
the last question is about Elastic DRS. If you're going to add another host into the cluster, is there a way that we can get an alert that said, hey, we burst, you hit 80% capacity, so we added a host, because I'm not going to be looking in there every day, right? I need to look at other things. So if there is a way to fire off an email or something like that to say, hey, we got a new host added in, that way we can also figure out licensing if we have to.
Similar as you see today, the moment you add a host, you will see an additional amount of operations logged by vSphere, and you can get an alert on that one as well. Right?
Okay, so pull it that way, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So I just got the wrap-up sign, so we will be answering some of your questions outside, right? But we have limited amount of time due to our schedule.